astonishing set of claims, facts and figures, self-serving, selective, a farrago of distortions and misinterpretations, misrepresentations and misquotations from the other side of the debate today. We witnessed a lot of individuals having the audacity to come to this stage and defend the right, defend and advocate for human dignity being a part of fundamental rights. Now we need to understand what fundamental rights are. Fundamental rights are those rights which are explicit. Fundamental rights are those rights which are implied as well as explicit and which are substantiated in the clauses of the fundamental rights with substantial terminologies, right? Dignity in a layman's language cannot be properly understood. Dignity, what a layman perceives dignity to be, right? Anything associated with him can be a part of his dignity. For example, a big landowner can claim that the acres of land that he owns is a part of his dignity. But we should remember that right to property was a part of fundamental rights. It was removed and was placed as a legal right, right? That does not mean that it's not enforceable, it's still enforceable, right? It's just not a part of fundamental right. Why? Because we put the society's prospect before the individual prospect, which is very necessary at that point of time because India was moving in a very socialist pattern, and the socialist pattern of India, had to redistribute the land between the poor people, right? Because a lot of lands were owned by the zamindars, acres and acres of land were owned by zamindars, and these lands were confined only to a few people, right? This only allowed individualistic perspective to be prioritized. Now, moving on to the second part of my argument, right to movement has been said by various judges over the course of judgments that is a part of fundamental right. But Supreme Court has also said over the years that people who are suffering from AIDS and prostitutes who are suffering from AIDS cannot be allowed to move. Why? Because they might indulge in sexual practices, and this might also allow them to spread this particular disease forward, right? Now we need to understand why we need to stop them. We need to stop them because we are focusing on a larger part of the society rather than only the individual. When we are protecting the individual, we also need to protect the other part of the society. The court needs to keep that in mind. The court has very well kept that in mind because we have seen that AIDS is a very big problem in the country and as well as the world today. And a lot of institutions like WHO has been claiming and saying it over and over again through various data, facts, and statistics. Right. So we prioritized, the societal affairs over dignity of an individual, which was not a dignity, which was a farce, I should say. Because a person suffering from AIDS moves to some other place, indulges in sexual activities, spreads the disease, and then claims that it's a part of his human dignity. I don't think it's a part of his human dignity. The society also needs to be protected. Right. That is one argument that can be substantiated in this case. Now, moving forward with it, we need to understand that yes, dignity has been substantiated in ethical and moral grounds by a lot of philosophers, Dostoevsky, Albert Camus, Immanuel Kant, Friedrich Nietzsche. A lot of these philosophers have advocated what dignity is and how dignity matters. We can study that in moral education classes and value education classes, but not as a subject of law, because law talks about practicality. Law talks about cases which deals with a large number of society. Dignity is a very vague, absurd, and farce word to understand in that context. Now, I am not here to debate against what dignity is. I am in full support on ethical grounds of what dignity implies. But again, we need to understand that dignity can be a legal right, but cannot be a fundamental right. Why? Because even as a legal right can be enforced, and unless we have certain substantial amount of knowledge and amount of arguments that say that this particular thing can be defined as dignity, we cannot insert it as a part of the fundamental right. This is a very important argument. Why? Because fundamental rights, the list of the fundamental rights, have been moving, in and around the value of dignity. Now, fundamental rights has not refrained itself from dignity. The protection against discrimination, for example, is also a part of human dignity because anyone who is discriminated on the grounds of race, religion, or sex, right, is again losing his dignity. But the fundamental right has protected that, right? So we have certain provisions which have been advocating over the time about what dignity is, and it has protected dignity over the time. But again, adding it as a fundamental right creates a discrepancy. Law, constitution, these are really important in the sense that we sitting in this room as people who know and study law are not the only ones dealing with it. Any layman, any poor person, any local, any farmer right? Any peasant is also very much as much associated with law as we are, right? He might have his definition of dignity. I might have my definition of dignity, and both these definitions matter, but subject to the procedure established by law. Again, this is my foremost argument. Now, again, on ethical grounds, we talk about what dignity is. Like Dostoevsky mentions dignity as a very important value. Kant mentions dignity as a very important value. But these are philosophical grounds. Philosophy of law is dealt with jurisprudence, right? But constitution is a very concrete, systematic approach towards dealing legal problems that exist in the society. And that is the reason perhaps why our constitution makers were aware and conscious about how they should not insert dignity as a part of the fundamental right. They were conscious, they knew what dignity is. They were much more read and well versed than we are sitting in this room. And they had much more substantial knowledge about law. Right? Times have changed, irrespective of the change in times and the dynamic, societal changes. We still need to understand that this notion might create a lot of discrepancy, and we cannot support this. Here, I end my case, but not my cause. Thank you.
Any questions, please? No questions.